Hey everybody, in today's video I'm going to teach you how to be a social butterfly at a party. Or at the very least, I'm going to hopefully share some insight on what is actually going on when you get stuck, whether it be mentally, physically, socially, spiritually, anything like that, and kind of what is actually happening to you when you are able to get unstuck. So let's talk about a couple of things first. Obviously, being stuck sucks. So if you can imagine like your car gets stuck in some mud and you have to get out and push it, obviously it's not a good time, but it doesn't apply just to the physical world. It can also apply mentally. You can get mentally stuck. You can get obviously spiritually stuck. You can get energetically stuck. And in the case of working out, yoga, you can get physically stuck if you don't know what to do. And what you have to realize is that what is actually happening when you are able to break free of that is that you are breaking your frame, like the current frame, either you view yourself as or the current frame of the environment, the lens you're viewing the environment through. So you break that, you restructure yourself, you change what is relevant or central to you, you allow that to reform yourself internally, and then you refit yourself to the situation. And while that sounds very complicated, I'm going to break it down in a very easy analogy. And the first thing that we have to, the second thing we have to chat about now is that as humans, we are very adept at finding patterns. We are very, very good at looking at something big picture and quickly taking in the pattern. You do this unconsciously or consciously. And if you don't think you're skilled at it, I'm going to show you an example where you're like, oh yeah, I actually am good at picking up on patterns. So let's say you go to a party and you are relaxed. You show up to the party on time and you scan the room. If you are there to network, it'll be a little more conscious. It'll be a little more of an agenda. But in both cases, you're going to scan the room and you will pretty quickly deduce the vibe of the party. You will find out or figure out who is talkative, who is shy. You might even find out who the owner is. You'll find out who's going to be drinking too much later on. You're probably going to see somebody like, oh, I might connect with that person from just the way they're dressed. And you will do this pretty instantly. And obviously, if you're there to network, you might have some names in mind. You're like, oh, I know who that person is, this person is. And you might start to figure out who the players of the party actually are and where you fit into that. Now, in order for you to break the frame of the new person at the party, right? Let's say that there's a group talking, they're having a conversation, you show up to the party and you want to jump into this conversation. First thing you have to do is break your current frame, which is new person at the party. You'll generally do this by introducing yourself to the group. Say something like, hi, my name is Joe, or hi, my name is Jane, or hi, my name is Eddie. And then what you have to do is you have to restructure yourself because obviously now that you're no longer the new person at the party, you might listen to what they're talking about. And for this case of this example, let's say they're talking about food and someone's going to be a vegan because they're going to say it right away. Someone's going to be a carnivore, someone's going to be plant-based, someone's going to be flexitarian. There's all these different things that people will jump in with. You have to take that information and let it reform you. And you do that because it's gonna change what you're thinking about internally. It's going to kind of you might come up with your own ideas about what it is to have a good diet. And then after all of that, you can refit yourself to the group. And that's exactly what happens anytime you encounter something new or there's an obstacle. And if you want to be able, in the case of the party, to flow from conversation to conversation, you have to be able to do this. You have to be able to break whatever frame, right? So say you go to another group and they're talking about sports. You got to break the frame of the food conversation. And then you have to restructure yourself. You have to figure out, in my case, hopefully they're talking about something that I'm more into, like UFC, and then I'll allow that to change me, reform me internally, and then I'll offer an opinion. I'll refit myself to the group. right? And you'll do that from conversation to conversation, and that's kind of how you'll flow, and that's what you're doing. In the case of physicality, let's say yoga is the perfect example. You're doing that all the time in yoga, especially if you're doing something like free flowing, where you're just flowing on your own. You are basically always, especially if you want it to go smoothly from movement to movement, you're always breaking your frame. You're always you're restructuring yourself. You're changing what is central or relevant. If you're going from a standing flow and you want to go to the floor and do arm balances, and you want to do it in a smooth way, you got to change the conversation you're having in your body. You have to change internally and externally, and then you have to refit yourself to whatever pose it is that you're doing. And if you want to be a good movement practitioner, you have to kind of embody that. And if you're like, well, I get it in the case of the party, I don't get it in the case of yoga, let's take another thing that's maybe in between of both. So say that if you want to be a good dancer, aside from obviously the basics of listening to the beat and all that, if you want to be an entertaining dancer, if you want to be a fun dancer, say you're dancing with somebody, then you are playing with a certain pattern of movement, but you can't play with it for too long, or else the person across from you is going to get very bored. You yourself might get bored. So you play with the pattern long enough, and then you have to break that pattern, so you break the frame of that pattern, find a new pattern, restructure, right? Internalize the rhythm, let it change you, reform you, and then refit yourself to the music, if it's a new song, or if you're doing a new style of dance, say you're going from hip hop to salsa. So in all of those cases, that's exactly what you're doing. And I hope that is helpful. Now, you might be saying to yourself, well, how can I do that more often? And that's where you do want to find, again, a practice that will facilitate you doing that more often. So obviously anything of a flow state practice, something like yoga, something like maybe rock climbing, surfing, things where this happens, and if you aren't able to break your frame, you're going to get really stuck, and you have to be able to do that on the fly. And that's, I think, a better way to train yourself is by finding a practice that is physical and kind of pushes you to do that, because then later on, when it's more real life things or more social settings where you have to talk to people, or you have to maybe give a big presentation, or anything of that nature, you'll see the parallels, and it'll be a little more fun to do. So yeah, hope that helps. And if you have any questions, please send me a message. Bye.